People tossed coins at her feet as if she were a beggar. She was standing on a wet sidewalk in a downpour, 6 months pregnant, and had only $1,247 in the world. Her mother-in-law smirked and called it enough for a bus ticket out of town. Her own husband got into a car with his new woman and drove off, never even glancing back. Soaked and shamed, with absolutely nowhere to turn, Emma Hartwell had truly hit her lowest point. But they were all clueless about what was really happening. They didn't see the black Rolls-Royce that was just rounding the corner. They didn't know the billionaire sitting inside had been keeping an eye on her for the last 20 years. And they had no idea that the very company they used to ruin her was built on technology her own father had invented and they had stolen. What unfolds next is one of the most satisfying tales of revenge you will ever hear. It is the story of a pregnant woman with nothing left to lose, facing off against a billion-dollar empire. She didn't shout. She didn't plead for him to stay. She didn't even shed a tear. Instead, she just gave a small smile and turned away. A few moments later, she was being driven off in a billionaire's limousine, marking the true beginning of the war. You have to stick around for the whole story, because the way she dismantles their entire world will leave you speechless. This story will teach you something powerful. Silence is not weakness. It is patience. It is the calm before you play your winning cards. When the world throws you to the ground, you do not need to scream. You do not need to beg. You just need to remember who you are and what you are worth. If you have ever felt powerless, betrayed, or underestimated, this story is for you. Stay until the end. I promise the payoff is worth every second. And if this story moves you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story like this one. Inside the law offices of Sterling and Associates, the conference room on the 42nd floor felt freezing. It was not the kind of chill from an aggressive air conditioner, but a deep, penetrating cold that felt like a bad omen. The entire room was built to make people feel small, from its massive windows showing off the Seattle skyline to a polished mahogany table that cost more than an average person's yearly salary. Emma Hartwell was sitting all by herself at this enormous table, her hands placed over her pregnant belly in a protective gesture. She was 6 months along, utterly drained, and dressed in a worn-out maternity dress from a department store, its seams straining. Dark rings under her green eyes told the story of countless sleepless nights trying to figure out how her life had fallen apart so quickly. She used to be a corporate attorney, a very skilled one. She had graduated at the top of her class at Northwestern, the type of woman who was respected in every boardroom she entered. That woman felt like a distant memory now, like a character from another life. After 3 years of marriage to Marcus Vance, everything she believed about herself had been stripped away, leaving a hollow shell of a person who would jump at loud noises and constantly say sorry for just being there. The door opened. Marcus strode in first, the confident click of his Italian leather shoes on the marble floor announcing a man who felt entitled to everything. At 38 years old, he had the kind of handsome, airbrushed look that had initially drawn Emma to him. His dark hair was styled to perfection, his jawline was incredibly sharp, and a Rolex Submariner watch glittered on his wrist, a new gift to himself for a business deal she was never told about. Following him was Arthur Higgins, his lawyer. Arthur was 55, with the dead eyes of a predator and a known talent for ruining people's lives for $600 an hour. In his hand was a leather briefcase that likely held the documents that would finalize the destruction of Emma's world. However, it was the final person to enter who made Emma's heart stop. Victoria Vance glided into the room, as if she already owned the place, and given her family's influence, she very well might. At 64 years of age, Marcus's mother was the perfect image of wealthy sophistication. A Hermes scarf was elegantly arranged around her neck. Her silver hair was flawlessly styled, and her eyes held the same look of barely hidden disgust she always had for Emma. Emma was not expecting her mother-in-law to be there. Marcus offered no greeting to his wife. He did not even look at the baby bump that held his own child. He just glanced at his Rolex and let out an annoyed sigh. "Let's get this over with quickly," he said, dropping into a chair across from her. "I have reservations for dinner." Victoria took a seat next to her son, adjusting her scarf with perfectly manicured hands. "I made sure to be here. Someone has to see that this is resolved without any mess." Arthur Higgins clicked open his briefcase and pulled out a sheaf of papers. He pushed them across the vast table, using only the end of his pen, as though the papers themselves were dirty. "The conditions are very simple," he stated, his voice having the practiced, slick tone of someone who has delivered terrible news many times. "Mrs. Vance will get the 2014 Honda Civic, the money in her personal savings account, which has a balance of $1,247, and a single payout of $5,000. Emma just looked at the figures on the page. $1,247. That was all she had been able to put aside in 3 years, hiding tiny bits of cash from the household money Marcus gave her, treating her like a teenager with a weekly allowance. $5,000. That was what her life was worth to the man who had promised to love and cherish her forever. She thought of the legal career she had abandoned, the major clients she had given up, the entire future she had set aside because Marcus claimed he wanted a wife who would be supportive, not a competitor. She thought of the home she kept clean, the dinners she prepared, and the endless parties she hosted with a fake smile, only to be torn apart in the car on the way home for everything from her choice of dress to her attempts at conversation. "That is a generous offer, Ellie," Marcus said, using the pet name she once adored but now could not stand. "The prenuptial agreement says you get 0. I am being kind." Emma's reply was soft, almost a whisper. "I gave up my entire career. I put all my energy into supporting you for 3 years. I am pregnant with your baby." Before Marcus could even think of a response, Victoria interrupted, her voice coated in a layer of fake sweetness. "Why don't we talk about that?" she said. She retrieved a folder from her Birkin handbag and set it down on the table. "We are going to need a paternity test before we proceed with any more discussions. Considering the timeline of events, we have some questions." The ugly accusation just hung there in the silent room. Emma felt her jaw clench. The baby inside her kicked, almost as if her unborn daughter could feel the cruelty surrounding them. "The man who came to install the home theater system?" Emma asked, struggling to keep her voice from trembling. "I believe I spoke with him twice." Victoria's smile was like ice. "Twice can be more than enough." Emma then turned her gaze to Marcus. She really studied his face, trying to find any sign of the man she had once loved. The man who had shown up with flowers on their 3rd date and called her the most amazing woman he had ever known. The man who had proposed to her on one knee in Central Park and swore he would love her forever. He refused to look at her. "Just sign the papers, Ellie," Marcus mumbled, suddenly fascinated by his own fingernails. "Just accept the money. Go start your life over somewhere else. You could move back to Iowa." "Your aunt still lives out there, doesn't she?" Victoria chimed in. "I am sure that $5,000 will stretch much further in a small town." The baby kicked again, this time with more force. Arthur Higgins cleared his throat with obvious impatience. "Mrs. Vance, we are on a schedule here." Emma looked down at the documents laid out before her. The only sounds in the room were the quiet drone of the building's climate control system and the faint noise of city traffic many stories below. She knew she could put up a fight. She could sue for a much larger settlement, drag the whole messy affair through the courts, and make them suffer for every single cruel word they had ever said to her. She was a lawyer, after all. She understood her legal rights, but she also understood the Vances. She understood their wealth, their network, and their absolute readiness to ruin anyone who dared to oppose them. She had personally seen Marcus destroy a business rival with a lawsuit so brutal that the man lost his company and his family. She had watched Victoria flash a charming smile at a charity event while giving quiet orders to have a troublesome board member fired. If she decided to fight them, they would utterly demolish her, and they would take pleasure in every moment of it. Emma reached for the cheap plastic pen that had been left for her, pointedly ignoring the fancy fountain pen Arthur Higgins had placed beside it. Her hand was perfectly steady. Her eyes were completely dry. She signed her name. Emma Hartwell, not Vance. It occurred to her then that she had never legally taken his name. That one small act of defiance now seemed like the most brilliant move she had ever made. She pushed her chair back and stood up. Is that all? Marcus's voice held a trace of shock, and maybe even a little bit of letdown. No big speech, no tears. Emma headed for the door without saying a word. She has finally accepted her place, Victoria remarked to her son, her voice full of smug satisfaction. Emma paused, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She turned her head just enough for them to see the side of her face, just enough for them to see her expression. She smiled. It was not a smile of sadness. It was not a bitter smile. And it was definitely not the smile of someone who had been defeated. It was the smile of a person who knew a secret they did not. It was the smile of a woman standing on the edge of a cliff, preparing to take a leap that was about to change the entire game. Then she pulled the door open and left. The silence she left behind was heavy and absolute. What was that all about? Marcus asked, a new note of worry in his voice. Victoria just frowned and waved her hand as if to dismiss it. It is nothing. She is a nobody. Now, let's talk about the celebration for the initial public offering. Emma walked across the lobby of the law firm, the worn soles of her sneakers making a faint squeak on the polished marble. With every single step she took, a change came over her. Her shoulders began to straighten. Her chin came up. The hesitant shuffle of a broken woman was replaced by a steady, determined stride. In her pocket, her phone began to buzz. She glanced at her phone after pulling it from her purse. The screen showed an unknown number with a brief message. A black car is waiting outside. We have paid your father's debt. Emma froze right there in the hotel lobby as her heart began to race. It had been 22 years since her father passed away when she was only 10 years old. The official cause was a heart attack, but family members whispered it was from stress. What kind of debt was this about? Her dad was an inventor, a man full of dreams who spent his nights in a messy workshop, working on ideas that never seemed to bring in any money. How could a debt like that be connected to a black car parked out front? Emma walked through the revolving doors and out onto the street. The cold, persistent Seattle rain immediately started to fall on her. Her thin dress was soaked in just a few moments, clinging uncomfortably to her pregnant stomach. She just stood there, shivering and staring at her phone, unable to understand what the message meant. The revolving doors behind her moved once more. Marcus came out first, holding a large umbrella over himself and Arthur Higgins. Victoria came next, holding her own Burberry umbrella that likely cost more than everything Emma owned. A red Mercedes then drove up to the curb. The window came down, showing a stunning young woman with flawless makeup and a smile bright enough for a commercial. That was Jessica Lane, the vice president of marketing at Vance Tech. She was 28 years old, and for the last year, she had been Marcus's secret lover. Emma had known about the relationship for the past 6 months. She had discovered the text conversations, the hotel bills, and the expensive lingerie that was clearly not a gift for her. "Look who it is," Marcus announced with a loud, pointed tone, making sure Emma heard him. "My future." From inside the car, Jessica gave a little wave. "Honey, Victoria, get in. It is really coming down out here." Victoria started walking to the Mercedes, but then stopped. She glanced back at Emma, who was standing all by herself in the downpour, looking completely miserable. "You know," Victoria remarked, her voice dripping with the kind of smug cruelty that only the very rich can pull off. "I could never figure out what Marcus found so special about you. You have no family connections, no wealth, and no drive. You just had decent looks and a law degree you let go to waste." She opened her purse and grabbed a small handful of change, some quarters, dimes, and pennies. "This is for your bus fare, sweetheart. Think of it as a final gift from us." Victoria then threw the coins down at Emma's feet. They bounced and rolled across the wet sidewalk with a series of small clicks. Emma did not say a word. She made no move to pick them up. She showed no emotion at all. She just remained still as the rain fell on her, her green eyes locked on the woman who had made her feel worthless for 3 long years. "Let's go, Mother," Marcus shouted from the car. "She can handle it from here." The car sped off, its red taillights vanishing into the gloomy Seattle day. Emma was left alone on the sidewalk. The coins on the ground seemed to mock her. She was completely soaked, 6 months pregnant, and had only $1,247 left in her bank account, with no place to live. She had hit her lowest point. That is when she noticed a sound. It was a deep, rumbling noise, not like the usual city traffic. It was stronger, more refined. A car came around the corner. It was not just any car, but a Rolls-Royce Phantom, painted a shade of midnight blue, so deep it was nearly black. The chrome on the front grille shone brightly, even in the overcast weather. It moved through the other cars like a great shark swimming through the ocean. It was silent and unstoppable. It did not pull up to the hotel on the other side of the street, nor did it stop at the bank. It came to a stop right in front of Emma, the back window lowered with a quiet, smooth sound. The face of a man appeared. He looked sophisticated, with silver hair and kind eyes that held a hint of strength. He seemed to be in his late 50s, a man who had obviously faced challenges and emerged more resilient. "Hello there, Emma," he greeted her, his voice both warm and serious. "My name is Richard Cole. I was a close friend of your father. I think it is about time we had a conversation about everything that was taken from you." Emma just stared at the man in the Rolls-Royce. Rainwater dripped from her hair, streamed down her cheeks, and saturated her ruined dress. She was trembling now, though she could not tell if it was from the cold or from the shock of the moment. "I do not know who you are," she managed to say. Richard Cole offered a gentle smile. "No, you do not. But I have known about you for your entire life. I made a promise to your father that I would always look out for you. I have honored that promise, even when you did not make it easy." He reached inside his coat pocket, took out a photograph, and held it out for her through the open window. Emma paused for a second before stepping closer to take it, using her hand to protect it from the rain. The picture was old and a little faded. It showed 2 young men in their early 20s with their arms around each other, both smiling confidently for the camera. One of them was definitely her father, James Hartwell. He looked younger than she had ever seen him, but his kind eyes and the unique way he smiled were unmistakable. She would have known him anywhere. The other young man was a youthful Richard Cole. "Your father was the finest person I have ever known," Richard said. his tone filled with a sincere sense of loss. And the very company that just abandoned you was built using his stolen ideas. Emma's head shot up. What did you say? Get into the car, Emma. It is time for you to understand the real story of your family. She knew she should not get in. That was common sense. You do not get into a car with a stranger, especially one who says he knew your deceased father. It was a basic rule of safety. But there was something in his eyes that made her hesitate, a sense of familiarity. It reminded her of how her own father used to look at her, with a combination of pride and a desire to protect her that she had not seen in anyone else's eyes since he died. And then there was that text message. Your father's debt is paid. Emma looked down at the change scattered around her feet. Then her eyes moved to the Rolls-Royce, and to the man who said he had the answers to questions she never even knew she should be asking. Somewhere in the distance, a traffic light turned green. Horns honked. The world kept moving. Emma got into the car. The inside of the car was just as impressive as the outside. The cream-colored leather seats felt like they were cradling her. The soft, indirect lighting provided a sense of comfort. The air smelled of expensive leather and a faint, pleasant cologne. It was a level of luxury she had only seen from a distance during her time with Marcus, but had never personally felt. A privacy screen separated them from the driver. Richard touched a button, and the car started to move smoothly. You will find a blanket in the compartment next to you, he mentioned, pointing. There is also some hot tea in the center console. You are drenched and pregnant. Please, make yourself comfortable. Emma found everything just as he had described. She wrapped the soft cashmere blanket over her shoulders and took a small sip of the tea. It was made perfectly, at just the right temperature. It was English breakfast with a touch of honey. How could he possibly know how she liked her tea? You have been keeping an eye on me, she said. It was a statement, not a question. For more than 20 years, Richard confirmed, ever since your father passed away. Why? Richard paused for a few seconds. The car drove smoothly through downtown Seattle, creating a quiet space away from the loud traffic and the storm outside. Your father, James Hartwell, was a true genius, he started to explain. We first met at MIT. He was the brilliant inventor, and I was the one with the business sense. We had plans to change the world together. He stopped talking for a moment, and Emma could see a look of genuine sadness on his face. Then the car crash happened. A drunk driver sped through a red light. I was the one driving. Your mother was sitting in the back. Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. She had heard parts of this story before, but only in bits and pieces. Her father had never wanted to discuss it. Her grandparents would only talk about her mother in quiet, hushed tones, as if saying her name would bring back an overwhelming amount of sadness. She passed away, Emma said softly. Right away. And I lost my leg. Richard moved a little, and for the first time, Emma saw that his movements were slightly stiff. Your father was the one who pulled me out of the car. He saved my life. But in doing so, he lost the love of his life, and I have never stopped blaming myself for being the driver that day. The car got onto the freeway, leaving the city center behind. Your father never held it against me, Richard went on, not for a second, but he was deeply changed by it. He poured all his energy into his work. He came up with one invention after another, creating patents that I now realize were years ahead of their time. He was working on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and neural networks. Back in 1993, your father was developing algorithms that the tech industry in Silicon Valley would not catch up to for another 20 years. Emma remembered her childhood, seeing her father in his workshop. She recalled the smell of solder and coffee, and how his hands seemed to work a special kind of magic on keyboards and circuit boards that she did not understand at the time. He needed a business partner, Richard explained, someone who could manage the business side of things so he could concentrate on the technology. I was still in recovery. I had to go through several surgeries and 2 years of physical therapy. So, he found someone else to work with. A knot of dread tightened in Emma's gut. She already sensed what he was about to say. Howard Vance, she uttered, the name tasting like poison. Richard gave a slow, deliberate nod. Marcus's father. The man was a master of charm and persuasion. He sold your father a dream about them changing the world together with new technology. Richard's tone grew cold, and then he took everything. The car exited the highway, gliding into an affluent part of town. They passed sprawling estates shielded by high green hedges and imposing wrought iron fences. Howard talked your father, James, into signing over a temporary control of his patents, right when James was overwhelmed by the medical debts from your mother's funeral. Your dad was grieving, unfocused, and far too trusting. He never bothered with the fine print. Before he even knew what hit him, Howard had shuffled everything around. The patents vanished, moved into a shell company that Howard had absolute control over. But couldn't my father have fought him in court? He certainly tried. By that point, though, Howard had deep pockets. He had backers and a team of ruthless lawyers. He drowned your father in a sea of legal paperwork and frivolous lawsuits. James burned through his last penny trying to get back what was stolen from him. Richard's voice fell to a whisper. The stress is what killed him. The official cause was a heart attack. But I know better. Howard Vance might as well have put a gun to your father's head and pulled the trigger. Tears welled in Emma's eyes, not just for the father she barely remembered, but for the brilliant man she had completely misunderstood. She'd spent her life wondering why they had to be so frugal, so careful with every dollar, when her dad was such a genius. She just figured he was a visionary who couldn't turn his ideas into actual money. The reality was 100 times worse. "And what about you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Why couldn't you help him? The look of agony that washed over Richard's face was deep and real. I was still recovering from my accident. By the time I was back on my feet, James was gone, and Howard had covered his tracks so well there was nothing to find. I brought in private eyes, attorneys, even forensic accountants. For the last 20 years, I have been slowly, carefully putting a case together. The car came to a smooth stop before a pair of grand iron gates. Richard touched a control, and they glided open without a sound. Until this moment, he went on, I finally have what we need, every single document, every single transaction. Solid proof that the foundational technology of Vance Tech, the very patents that earned them billions, rightfully belonged to your father. And by law, that means they now belong to you. The vehicle proceeded up a winding driveway flanked by ancient, towering trees. At its end was a mansion that was both immense and inviting. It was nothing like the cold, sterile architecture of the Vance family estate. This place felt older, warmer. It felt like a real home, not a monument to wealth. Vance Tech is preparing to go public, Richard explained as they pulled up to the front entrance. Their initial public offering is set to value the company at $8 billion. But the second those patents are officially challenged, the moment it gets out that their entire corporation is built on a foundation of theft, the whole thing will come crashing down. A butler stepped out holding an umbrella and opened Emma's door, but she remained seated. Why wait until now to tell me? She asked. A sad smile touched Richard's lips. I did try. When you finished law school, I made an offer to finance your career. You turned me down. Emma's thoughts spun backward in a blur. The anonymous scholarship, that showed up right when her savings ran out. The job interview at that top-tier firm that felt almost too easy. The downtown apartment she supposedly won in a raffle she never even entered. It was you, she whispered, the realization dawning on her. All of that was you. I just wanted to lend a hand, but you were so fiercely independent, so set on making it on your own. I had to respect that. I respected you. His voice took on a harder edge. But Emma, you ended up marrying into the very family that ruined yours. And then they cast you aside like you were nothing. You have been on your own long enough. He pressed a thick, heavy folder into her hands. It felt substantial, life-changing. Everything you will ever need is right in here. Money, top lawyers, all the access you could want. But listen to me, Emma. He leaned in, his gaze sharp and serious. I am not going to fight this battle for you. I can give you the sword, but you have to be the one to swing it. Emma stared down at the folder on her lap. It held the evidence of her father's stolen future. It was the proof that Marcus's entire fortune was built on the wreckage of her family. Her mind flashed back to the boardroom. She could almost feel the cold sting of the coins hitting the floor around her. She pictured Victoria's smug, triumphant smile and Marcus's complete indifference to their unborn child, her baby, a Vance by name, perhaps, but a Hartwell by spirit and fire. She placed a hand on her stomach and felt a gentle flutter from within. I want them to have nothing, she said, her voice soft but cold as steel. They will. And I want to be the one to do it. I want Victoria to know it was me, not you. She will know. Emma looked up at him, her eyes now completely dry and filled with a new, unwavering resolve. So, let's get to work. Once inside the mansion, she was introduced to Walter Briggs, who ran Richard's security team. He was a former federal agent with silver hair and the calm, steady presence of someone who has seen the worst of the world and is impressed by none of it. He led her to a private suite that was already prepared with clothes in her size and all the comforts a pregnant woman could ask for. She took a long shower, washing away the last 3 years of her life. She changed into soft, comfortable clothes that actually fit her changing body. She ate a nourishing meal cooked by Richard's personal chef. For the first time in ages, she slept for 12 straight hours in a bed that felt like she was floating on a cloud. The following morning, she walked into Richard's home office, sat down, and opened the folder. It was all there, a meticulous history of betrayal. There were the original patent applications from 1991. There were corporate transfer agreements bearing forged signatures. There were bank statements detailing payoffs to lawyers tasked with burying the case. There were even email chains between Howard Vance and his legal team about how to deal with the Hartwell situation. It was a complete picture, 20 years of evidence, collected with relentless patience. Tucked at the very bottom was a handwritten letter. It read, "My dearest Emma, if you are reading this, my old friend Richard finally figured out a way to show you the truth. I'm so sorry I couldn't fight longer and harder for us. I'm sorry I had to leave you when you were so little. But I need you to know this. Everything I ever made, I made with you in mind. My inventions, my research, my biggest dreams. All of it was supposed to be your inheritance. No matter what anyone has ever told you about my life, your father was a brilliant man whose legacy was stolen. You are not the child of a failed dreamer. You are the rightful heir to an empire. Now go and take back what is yours. All my love, Dad." Emma read the letter 3 separate times. Then she clutched it to her chest and finally allowed herself to weep. When the tears stopped, she dried her face, squared her shoulders, and met Richard's gaze. "Tell me absolutely everything you need to know," she said. "I am going to tear them down." 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Emma Hartwell was a completely different woman. She had gotten a haircut. It was not a drastic change, but it was a clear signal. The deep exhaustion hadn't vanished from the shadows under her eyes, but it had sharpened into something new. It was now pure determination. The brilliant legal mind that had graduated at the top of her class from Northwestern Law was finally waking up from a 3-year slumber. She had taken up residence in a brownstone on Capitol Hill, one of the many properties Richard kept in Seattle. It was not a grand mansion or an over-the-top luxury penthouse. It was simply a quiet, private place where she could focus on her work, and she worked constantly. Emma was seated at a large desk, surrounded by stacks of legal documents, open case files, and a glowing laptop with dozens of research tabs open. Across from her sat her former professor, Margaret Porter. Maggie was 60 years old, with an intellect as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, and was one of the few professional contacts Emma had kept after leaving her law career. Maggie had been her guide at Northwestern and had spent the last week helping her polish her long-dormant legal expertise. "This is excellent," Maggie commented, leafing through the draft of the patent challenge. "Truly impressive. Your argument on the chain of title is completely solid." "It has to be," Emma said, arching her back to relieve some of the pressure. Now 7 months pregnant, her body was constantly reminding her of its limits. Victoria Vance can afford the best legal team in the entire country. They will pounce on any tiny mistake, any small weakness. "You know, you could have a whole team doing this," Maggie pointed out, peering over her glasses. "Richard Cole has practically infinite funds. You could easily have an army of lawyers handling this tedious work." Emma firmly shook her head. "No, I have to know every single detail inside and out. When I stand up in that courtroom to argue this case, I can't be relying on somebody else's work." Maggie broke into a warm smile. "Now that is the Emma Hartwell I remember. Always stubborn, thorough." Emma gently corrected her. "There is a very important difference." She got up and stretched, wandering over to the window with a view of the quiet street. It was raining again, which was no surprise in Seattle. She didn't mind it anymore. The overcast sky felt like a reflection of her own mood, and she found a strange comfort in the way the constant drizzle seemed to wash the world clean. "I've been thinking about our approach," Emma said. "If I sue them directly, Victoria will see it coming. She'll rally her lawyers, and they'll bury me in legal motions before I can get anywhere. So what's the other option? I start with the patent office. I'll file a discreet complaint and ask for a formal review of the original Hartwell patents, including all the transfer paperwork." Emma turned to look right at Maggie. "Doing that places an automatic hold on any corporate deals involving those patents." Maggie's expression changed as the implication hit her. "The IPO." "Exactly. Vance Tech can't go public while its main intellectual property is being challenged. The liability for shareholders would be enormous." "That's brilliant," Maggie said, nodding slowly. "You stop their biggest move in its tracks without ever firing a shot. They won't even know where the attack is coming from at first. And by the time they do," Emma said, walking back to her desk and opening a calendar on her laptop, "I'll have everything I need. The IPO is set for 3 weeks from today. If I file on Monday, the hold will be active by Wednesday. The news should leak by Friday." "And then what?" "And then," Emma said, with a small, determined smile, "we watched the panic begin." Monday arrived with a cold, gray light. Emma chose her clothes with care, selecting a professional outfit that fit her pregnant shape but still projected an image of authority. She hadn't put on a suit in more than 3 years, and was surprised at how right it felt, like she was stepping back into a suit of armor she didn't realize she'd missed. Walter Briggs, drove her to the downtown Federal Building. He didn't ask any questions or offer his opinion. He just opened her door, walked with her to the entrance, and sat in the lobby as she went inside to handle her business. The actual filing process was over in less than an hour. It was a simple matter of paperwork, signatures, and dealing with a clerk who seemed completely uninterested until he saw the names on the documents. Then, he suddenly looked nervous. Emma provided copies of the evidence Richard had gathered, just enough to get the formal review started without revealing her full strategy. "This could take a little while to process," the clerk said, choosing his words carefully. "I understand," Emma answered. "Just please ensure it is handled by the book." She walked out of the building, feeling a sense of relief she hadn't felt in years. The first piece was on the board. The game had officially started. All she could do now was wait. On Wednesday morning, Emma was woken by the buzzing of her phone. It was a text from Richard. "Turn on the financial news." She found the remote and switched on the television in her small apartment. The morning business report was already displaying breaking news banners. "The Vance Tech IPO has hit an unexpected roadblock," the news anchor announced. "Sources are reporting that a patent dispute has initiated an automatic review, which freezes the company's plans for its upcoming public offering. Analysts are shocked by this last-minute development, which has occurred just weeks before the company was expected to launch one of the biggest tech IPOs in the history of Seattle." Emma slowly sat down, resting a hand on her stomach. The baby kicked, a firm and definite movement. It felt like a small celebration. "We did it, my love," Emma whispered. "We got started." Her phone began to ring. It was Richard. "Are you seeing this?" he asked. "I'm seeing it." "How are you feeling?" Emma thought about his question for a moment. On the television screen, financial experts were wildly guessing who could be behind the complaint. They mentioned rival companies, foreign powers, even corporate spies. Not one of them brought up the daughter of James Hartwell. "I feel," Emma said after a pause, "like I'm finally hitting back. This is only the first step. They will eventually figure out it was you." "I know, but I'll be ready when they do." Utter chaos had taken over the headquarters of Vance Tech. Marcus stood in his spacious corner office, watching the financial news with a jaw set so hard it seemed ready to break. Arthur Higgins was on the speakerphone, his slick voice filling the tense air. "We have no idea who filed it," Arthur explained. "The complaint is completely sealed. It could have been anyone." "I don't care who it is," Marcus snapped back. "I care about making it go away. The IPO is everything to me. My investors are already blowing up my phone. The board is calling a meeting in 2 hours. These things require patience, Marcus. The patent office has its own review process." "I don't have patience." The door to the office swung open. Victoria Vance walked in, looking flawless as ever, in a cream-colored suit that likely cost more than a car. Yet Marcus saw an emotion in her eyes that was rarely there. Fear. "Leave us," Victoria told her son. "Mother, this is my company." "I said, leave us. I need to speak to Arthur alone." Marcus glared at his mother for a long, tense moment. Then, with his jaw still locked in anger, he spun around and left the room. Victoria shut the door firmly behind him. She picked up the receiver, taking Arthur off the speaker. "Arthur, listen to me very closely. I need you to find out who submitted that complaint. Use every single resource at our disposal." "Victoria, those patent filings are sealed tight. I don't care if you have to lean on every contact we have from here to Washington, D.C. Find out who it is." There was a brief silence on the other end of the call. "You have an idea, don't you?" Arthur said slowly. "You think you know who it is?" Victoria moved to the window. She gazed out at the Seattle skyline, watching the gray clouds drift in from the Puget Sound. "I think," she said in a low voice, "that our past is finally catching up with us." "What past? Victoria, what are you not telling me?" Victoria didn't answer for a long moment. Finally, she let out a sigh. "Howard made certain choices 30 years ago, choices that I have dedicated my entire life to keeping buried." "What sort of choices?" "The kind that build fortunes," she said, "and the kind that leave a trail of enemies." "Who? Who would hold a grudge for 30 years to—" Victoria's mind flashed back to the Rolls-Royce she had spotted from Marcus's car, the custom license plate with the Cole family symbol, the quick glimpse of a pregnant woman getting into the back seat. "Find out if Richard Cole has been in touch with Emma Hartwell," Victoria said at last. "Emma? Your daughter-in-law? I thought she was a nobody." Victoria's laugh was sharp and full of bitterness. "She is James Hartwell's daughter." A heavy silence hung on the line. "Oh," Arthur finally breathed out. "Oh, that is very bad. Yes, it is. And that is why I need you to learn everything you can. Now. And what if it is her? What if Emma is the one behind all this?" Victoria's reflection stared back at her from the dark glass of the window. She looked old, she looked tired, but she did not look defeated. Not yet. "Then we will crush her," Victoria said, "completely and without mercy." Emma used the rest of that week to prepare. She met with Maggie each day, going over and sharpening her legal plans. She went through every single document Richard had given her, committing to memory small details that could prove vital down the road. She ate well, slept whenever her anxious mind would allow it, and did her best to control the stress that was always just beneath the surface. On Friday night, she was studying legal precedents when her phone buzzed. It was a text from a number she didn't recognize. It wasn't Richard. She had his number saved now. Emma opened it. "I know it was you. This is not over. V." Emma looked at the message on the screen. Her heart began to pound, but she made herself take slow, deep breaths. Victoria knew the first skirmish was won, but the true war was about to begin. She thought about typing a reply. She ran through a few possibilities in her head. She could deny it. She could be defiant. She could send a witty retort to put Victoria on the defensive, but instead, she set the phone down. She didn't reply at all. Let Victoria wonder. Let her be afraid of the silence. Let her lie awake at night, imagining all the things Emma might do next. That night, Emma had a dream about her father. He was in his workshop, with all his tools and blueprints spread around him. He looked over at her and smiled. "I'm so proud of you," he said. "I'm terrified," she confessed. "That is all right. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right, even when you are." "What if I fail? What if they crush me just like they crushed you?" Her father stood up and walked over to her. He put a hand on her shoulder. It felt so warm, so real. "You are not by yourself this time," he told her. "And you are not broken. You are a Hartwell. We always get back up." Emma woke up with tear stains on her pillow and a new fire in her heart. She had won the first round, but she knew with complete certainty that the most difficult part was still ahead. Victoria Vance had not survived for 64 years in the brutal world of corporate power by being passive. Within 48 hours of finding out that Emma was the source of the patent complaint, she had activated every asset she had: private detectives, media insiders, political favors she had earned through decades of donations and carefully chosen friendships. If Emma wanted to go to war, then Victoria was going to give her one. The first attack came on a Tuesday morning. Emma was in the middle of breakfast when Maggie called. her voice strained with worry. "Turn on Channel 5, right now." Emma fumbled for the remote. The morning news was featuring a special report. The words on the screen made her stomach turn to ice. The polished news anchor leaned into the camera, her expression grave. The story was about to take a nasty turn. "We have breaking news in the Vance Tech patent controversy that has shaken Seattle's corporate world to its core. Our sources indicate the confidential complaint was filed by none other than Emma Vance, the former wife of the company's chief executive officer, Marcus Vance. But the revelations do not stop there. Insiders allege that Mrs. Vance has been collaborating with rival billionaire Richard Cole, which casts their relationship in a very questionable light. The broadcast then showed a paparazzi photo of Emma and Richard outside his grand home. The shot was framed to look compromising and deeply suggestive. While neither Mrs. Vance nor Mr. Cole could be reached for a statement, the message was loud and clear. This was starting to look less like a legal claim and more like a personal vendetta. Emma's phone began to vibrate uncontrollably as notifications flooded her screen. A quick glance at social media confirmed her worst fears. The hashtag gold digger. Emma was rapidly gaining traction. Vicious comments from complete strangers piled up. "She's just furious she got busted cheating." "What a classic move for a bitter ex. I bet that baby isn't even his." Who would be so hateful that they would try to wreck their ex-husband's entire company? The gold digger must not have gotten enough from the divorce, so now she wants to burn it all down. Emma placed her phone on the table, her hands trembling. An hour later, her friend Maggie arrived to find her in the exact same spot, just staring blankly at the wall. "Emma, please say something." "They are claiming I had an affair with Richard," Emma said, her voice sounding empty. "And they're raising doubts about my baby's father. Again." "It is a calculated attack on your character," Maggie insisted. "It's a classic strategy. When you cannot challenge the facts, you attack the person who delivered them." "But it is working," Emma replied, pointing to her phone, which was still buzzing nonstop. "The whole world believes their story. They see me as gold digger Emma. That is who I am to them now." Maggie took a seat facing her, her posture radiating urgency. "Emma, you have to fight back. Release a public statement. You need to control the story before they do. If I say anything, it just makes their claims seem legitimate. I will look like I am on the defensive. But if you stay silent, you are letting them win without a fight." Not long after Maggie left, Richard called. Emma watched the phone ring 3 times before she finally picked up. "I can make this whole thing disappear," Richard stated bluntly, wasting no time on greetings. "I just have to make one phone call, and this story vanishes from the news." Emma shut her eyes, tempted by the simple solution. It would be so easy to let Richard use his influence and wealth to erase this nightmare. She could let someone else handle this for her. "No," she said with finality. "This is my battle to fight. I will deal with this myself. Emma, think about your reputation. It is already in tatters. If I let you fix this, it will just make me look guilty. They claim I am using you to get back at Marcus. If you make this story go away, you will be proving them right." A heavy silence hung on the line. "What is your plan?" Richard eventually asked. "I do not have one yet, but I will find a way." She ended the call before he had a chance to object. That evening was the lowest point of her life. Emma was all alone in the dark house, with every light turned off, her hand resting protectively on her belly. The baby was still, almost as if it could feel its mother's pain. The rain outside had stopped, and the silence that followed felt heavy and suffocating. And then Emma began to weep. She had not shed a tear when Marcus handed her the divorce papers. She had not cried when Victoria mockingly tossed coins at her. She had endured 3 years of constant humiliation without breaking. But now, in the darkness, feeling the weight of the world's judgment, she finally let go. The tears flowed uncontrollably. Tears for her father, who had died with his life's work stolen from him. Tears for the mother she never got to know. Tears for the sharp, successful lawyer she used to be, before she gave it all up for a man who was never worthy of her. And tears for the child growing inside her, who might be born into a world that saw its mother as nothing more than a greedy liar. Then the baby kicked, a strong, determined kick. Emma let out a small gasp, pressing her palm against the sudden movement. She felt the tiny limbs push back, a powerful reminder that she was not by herself in this fight. "I know, little one," Emma whispered softly. "I know. We are not going to surrender." She wiped the tears from her face and took a long, steadying breath. Then she took another. The despair had not vanished, but a new feeling was rising to meet it. Something tougher, something more resolute. They wanted her to be quiet. They expected her to hide in shame while they dictated her story. But Emma Hartwell was finished with that kind of silence. From now on, her silence would be a tool, not a sign of defeat. She opened her laptop and started to write. The following morning, Emma made a call to Karen Wells. Karen was a 45-year-old investigative journalist for the Seattle Tribune, a true veteran of her field. She had built a formidable reputation by taking down corrupt corporations and exposing powerful figures who believed they were above the law. She was known for being tough, cynical, and impossible to fool. She was the perfect person for Emma's plan. They chose a small coffee shop in Ballard for their meeting, far away from the prying eyes of the city center. Karen showed up wearing jeans and a leather jacket, with her gray streaked hair tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail. She glanced at Emma's pregnant stomach, then met her eyes and sat down without any small talk. "I saw the news reports," Karen said flatly. "It has been a difficult week for you." "I have a story that I think you will be interested in," Emma began. "And it is not about me. It is about Vance Tech. It is about stolen ideas. It is about a powerful family that constructed an entire business empire on a foundation of lies." Karen's gaze sharpened. "I have heard the rumors circulating about you, Mrs. Vance. My name is Hartwell," Emma corrected her firmly. "Emma Hartwell. And every single thing you have heard about me is a carefully constructed lie designed to ruin my credibility. Now, let me show you the truth." Emma pushed Richard's file folder to the center of the table. Karen eyed it for a second before opening it and starting to read. Over the next 2 hours, Emma meticulously explained every detail. She showed her the original patent designs. She pointed out the forged transfer papers. She laid out a clear timeline that demonstrated how Vance Tech's essential technology was taken from a man on his deathbed. Karen grilled her with tough questions. She pointed out potential weaknesses. She made Emma defend every single one of her assertions. Emma met each challenge with a calm and detailed response, with the confidence of a lawyer who had thoroughly prepared her case. When Karen finally looked up, her entire demeanor had shifted. The initial skepticism was still visible, but now it was blended with something new, a deep and genuine interest. "If what you are showing me is authentic," Karen said, choosing her words carefully, "then this is an enormous story. It is authentic, and I am willing to put my name on it. I want my face and my story out there. I want everyone to know that this came from me." "But why?" "You have the option to remain anonymous. You could just let the proof speak for itself." Emma's mind flashed to the vicious hashtag. She remembered the hateful comments from strangers calling her a thief, She pictured Victoria's arrogant expression, so sure of her power to crush anyone who challenged her. "Because I have nothing to be ashamed of," Emma declared. "My father was a genius. His life's work was stolen from him, and I intend to reclaim what rightfully belongs to my family. I want Victoria Vance to be looking at my face when her world comes crashing down." Karen observed her for a long, silent moment. A slow, sharp smile spread across her face, the smile of a hunter who has found her prey. "All right, Miss Hartwell, let us go burn their empire to the ground." The story was published 3 days later. The headline was explosive: "The Vance Tech Deception, How a Billion-Dollar Corporation Was Built on Patents Stolen from a Grieving Widow." The Seattle Tribune gave it the front page. Karen Wells had been meticulous, confirming every piece of evidence, finding witnesses, and weaving a story that was both emotionally powerful and legally sound. The article had everything. It showed James Hartwell's initial patent applications. It included the documents proving Howard Vance's fraudulent transfer. It presented a timeline showing that the core technology of Vance Tech had been created in Hartwell's garage 20 years before the company even existed. And right in the middle of it all was Emma. Her full name, her picture, her entire story. The daughter of a brilliant inventor, finally demanding justice. The public reaction was immediate and massive. In just a few hours, the hashtag Justice for Hartwell started trending everywhere. It was quickly followed by Vance fraud. The very same online world that had condemned Emma just days before was now rushing to support her. Opinion articles began appearing about corporate greed and the abuse of creative minds. Legal scholars confirmed the strength of the patent claims. Financial reporters called for immediate accountability. The entire narrative had been reversed. Inside the Vance Tech building, Marcus stared at the news coverage like a man watching his own home be consumed by flames. "This is impossible," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "My father was a decent man. He started this company with nothing." Victoria stood with her back to him, gazing out the window. She had been completely silent since the article was released. "Mother," Marcus's voice was strained, "did you have any idea about this?" Victoria slowly turned around. Her face was like stone, but her eyes were sharp and calculating. They were always calculating. "Go back to your office, Marcus. Did you know?" "I told you to go back to your office." Marcus looked at his mother in disbelief. This was the woman who had raised him, molded him, and directed every step of his life. "You knew," he said, the realization dawning on him. "You knew this entire time." Victoria's expression hardened. "Do not be so naive. How else did you think this company was created? Your father was no genius, Marcus. He was a man who seized an opportunity, and I have dedicated 40 years of my life to safeguarding his legacy. Our legacy. By deceiving me? Your whole life? By providing you with everything you have. This company, this fortune, this name. Do you have any concept of what I have sacrificed to keep all of this together?" Marcus took a step back, as if he were seeing a stranger. And in that moment, maybe he was. "What did you do?" he asked in a whisper. "I did what was necessary, and I will continue to do so. Now, go to your office and allow me to manage this crisis." Marcus turned and walked out. Victoria returned to the window, looking down at the city spread out below her. Her city, her kingdom, everything she had fought for, protected, and schemed to keep. She took out her phone and called Jessica Lane's private line. "We have a serious problem," Victoria said as soon as Jessica answered the call. "I need you in my office, immediately." Back at the brownstone, Emma followed the news reports with a growing sense of astonishment. She had braced herself for denial, for heated arguments, She had fully expected a vicious counteroffensive, but instead, the entire story had flipped. The very same news outlets that had branded her a gold digger were now celebrating her as a hero fighting for justice. Maggie showed up with a bottle of champagne, bringing a non-alcoholic one for Emma. "You did it," Maggie declared, pouring a glass for herself. "You actually pulled it off." "Not quite." Emma permitted herself a faint smile. "This is only the first move. Victoria is not going to surrender that easily. Let her try anything she wants. You've got the truth on your side this time." Emma placed a hand over her belly. The baby responded with a kick, a strong and reassuring movement. "We are going to be just fine, sweetheart," Emma whispered to her unborn child. "We are going to be just fine." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she truly believed it. What she did not know was that just 6 blocks from her, inside a sleek high-rise office building, Victoria Vance was orchestrating a response that would make the previous battle look like a simple disagreement. And she had no idea that Jessica Lane had a contact inside Emma's own doctor's office, and a significant amount of money was about to be secretly exchanged. She had no idea that things were about to get much worse. For now, in this single moment, Emma let herself feel an emotion she had long forgotten. It was hope. Jessica Lane was a lot of things, but she was certainly not a fool. She had observed the entire Vance Tech disaster with the sharp, calculating mind of a master chess player watching an opponent lose. There was the patent scandal, the stock prices that plummeted, the emergency board meetings that left Marcus looking more drained and panicked each day. The company was a sinking ship, and Jessica had no plans to go down with it. However, she also wasn't about to leave with nothing to show for her time. She had put 3 years of her life into this scheme. 3 years spent with a married man, faking interest in his boring complaints about his business, and tolerating his mother's smug approval. She felt she was owed something for her trouble. That was precisely why she found herself in Victoria Vance's office at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night, going over her options. "The media is tearing us apart," Victoria said, walking back and forth across her office. The calm, collected woman from a week ago was starting to unravel. "Karen Wells has even more documents. A follow-up story is coming. The board is discussing asking Marcus to resign." "What about Emma?" Jessica inquired. "Can we ruin her credibility?" "We already tried that. It failed. It only made her seem stronger. So we have to hit her with something much stronger, something that she cannot easily dismiss." Victoria stopped her pacing. She stared at Jessica with a look that was a mix of desperation and cold strategy. "What exactly are you proposing?" Jessica leaned in, her voice low and conspiratorial. "The question of the baby's father. We brought it up when they were getting divorced, but we never had any real evidence, just a feeling, because there is no evidence. That baby is Marcus's. Does that really matter? All we have to do is plant the seed of doubt. If we can find medical records that tell a different story. Medical records are confidential. Getting them illegally is a serious federal crime. I am aware of that." Jessica smiled, the kind of smile that had charmed Marcus in the beginning, all surface appeal with a dangerous edge. "But so is patent fraud. What is one more crime?" Victoria was quiet for a long time. Outside the massive windows, the Seattle skyline sparkled, completely unaware. "You have someone," Victoria finally stated, "at her doctor's office." "I have connections everywhere. It is what I do." Jessica took out her phone. "If the price is right, we can get our hands on Emma's prenatal files. We look for anything, absolutely anything, that points to issues, conflicting information, or problems with the timeline. Then we leak it to the gossip magazines. All of a sudden, the story is no longer about patent fraud. It becomes about Emma Hartwell and her deceptions. And what if the records are clean? Jessica's smile grew wider. In that case, we create something. Medical files can be doctored. Paper trails can be created from scratch. By the time they figure out it is a fake, the harm will have been done. Victoria knew she should have refused. She was certain of it. No matter what she had done, no matter what boundaries she had crossed, she had never gone after a pregnant woman. But desperation can turn anyone into a monster. Do it, Victoria said. Do whatever is necessary. 3 days later, Emma's world turned into a nightmare. She had been sleeping more soundly lately. The anxiety was still present, but the positive Tribune story had given her something to cling to, a sense of progress, a flicker of hope. And then she looked at her phone. The headline was plastered across every gossip news website. Sterling heiress's secret, medical records, suggest baby, may not belong to Marcus Vance. A cold dread washed over Emma. She scrolled through the story, her hands trembling. It mentioned leaked medical files that claimed Emma had received fertility treatments before she was married, treatments that allegedly involved a donor. The documents looked incredibly authentic. They were detailed, they were convincing, and they were a complete lie. Emma had never undergone fertility treatments. She had never had a reason to. She became pregnant on her own, just 3 months after she and Marcus decided they wanted to start a family. The timing had been perfect. The baby's father was never in doubt. But none of that would mean anything to the people who read this story. She called her doctor's office right away. The receptionist's voice was shaky. "Ms. Hartwell, Dr. Patterson has been trying to get in touch with you. We had a security breach. Someone illegally gained access to your files." "I know," Emma replied. Her voice strained. "I am reading all about it as we speak." She ended the call and dialed Richard. He picked up on the very first ring. "I saw it," Richard said, before she could even get a word out. "I am getting the lawyers involved. We are going to find out who is behind this, and I do not want your lawyers." The words shot out, sharper than she had meant them to be, but she could not pull them back. She could not hold back the fury and terror that felt like it was about to swallow her whole. "Emma, this is my battle. It is mine. I will take care of it." She hung up the phone. Her breathing was fast and shallow. The world started spinning around her, and that is when the pain started. It was intense. It was immediate. It felt like a knife had been plunged into her stomach. Emma cried out and doubled over, struggling to breathe. Her sight went blurry. Her hands flew to her stomach, trying to protect her baby. "No," she whispered. "Not at this moment. Please, not at this moment." She fumbled for her phone. She tried to make a call. Her fingers refused to work. The room began to tilt. The floor came rushing up at her. The very last thing she heard, before everything went black, was the sound of her phone skittering across the hardwood floor. Emma woke up in a hospital bed. She saw a white ceiling, harsh fluorescent lights, and she heard the rhythmic beep of machines tracking her heartbeat and breathing. For a brief second, she could not recall what had happened. Then it all came flooding back. The article, the intense pain, the collapse, the baby. "The baby," Emma said through a gasp as she tried to get up. "Is the baby? Take it easy. Be calm." Maggie's face, etched with worry, appeared over her. "The baby is perfectly fine. You are both perfectly fine." Emma sank back into the pillows, relief washing over her as tears streamed down her cheeks. "What happened to me? Your blood pressure shot up because of the stress. You passed out and hit your head when you fell. The doctors are saying you have to rest. Complete and total bed rest. No more fighting. No more stress. I cannot stop. If I stop fighting now, they will win. They will take everything my father worked for, and they will walk away free." Maggie grabbed Emma's hand, her grip firm enough to demand her attention. "Emma, you have to live. Your father would have wanted that. He would want his grandchild to have a mother. This quest for revenge is not worth your life. Emma turned her head to the wall as tears streamed down her face. She was 7 months along in her pregnancy. Her name had been dragged through the mud. Again, her health was failing. And somewhere out there, Victoria Vance was likely toasting her success. This was far worse than hitting rock bottom. It was like falling into a bottomless pit. For 3 days, Emma lay motionless in that hospital bed. She ignored every phone call. She refused to look at the news. She did nothing but stare at the ceiling, feeling the gentle movements of her baby inside her. On the third day, she finally spoke to Maggie. "Could you bring me my laptop?" "Emma, the doctors advised you to rest. I just need to read something," she insisted. "Only for a couple of minutes." Maggie reluctantly handed over the computer, her eyes filled with worry, as Emma powered it on. But Emma did not visit any news websites. She stayed away from social media. She completely avoided the storm of coverage that was trying to destroy her. Instead, she found a folder, simply named Dad, and opened a scanned image inside. It was a letter her father, James Hartwell, had written for her 10th birthday, just 2 weeks before he died. "My dearest Emma, you are 10 years old today, and I just cannot grasp how quickly the time has passed. It feels like only yesterday I held you as a tiny baby, and now you are this incredibly bright, strong-willed, and stubborn young lady who challenges me on nearly everything. I absolutely love that spirit in you. Never let that fire go out. I realize I am not the world's greatest father. I tend to get lost in my work. I forget about birthdays, school performances, and other important moments. Your mother was always my anchor, but since we lost her, I have felt adrift. But I need you to know something I probably do not say nearly enough. You are the single best thing I have ever brought into this world. You are better than any of my inventions. You are more valuable than any patent. No matter what happens in my life, through all the failures and successes, you will forever be my proudest achievement. Be courageous, my sweet girl. Be intelligent, be compassionate, and never ever allow anyone to make you feel insignificant. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Dad." Emma read her father's letter 3 separate times. Then she shut the laptop and met Maggie's gaze. "I have been approaching this all wrong. Like a victim," Emma said, her voice measured, "just reacting to every move they make. Playing a constant defense." "What is the other option?" Maggie asked. "I am an attorney, a very good one. It is time for me to stop reacting and start building a case." She slowly pushed herself to a sitting position, fighting off a wave of dizziness. "Someone broke the law to get my medical records. That is a serious federal offense. The hospital keeps detailed logs. There are digital footprints. There are security cameras." Maggie's eyes grew wide with understanding. "You want to figure out who was behind it. I want to find the person who gave the order. And I am willing to bet that trail will take me right to Victoria's doorstep." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Emma felt a flicker of something besides despair. She felt like a lawyer again. Emma Hartwell had always excelled at digging for the truth. It was that skill that had made her a top lawyer, back in the life she used to have. She had a unique talent for sifting through mountains of data to find the one crucial detail that changed everything. She could follow faint trails that most people would ignore. She could construct an entire case out of tiny, scattered pieces. Now, she was propped up in her bed at the brownstone, her laptop open, with legal pads spread around her like a scattering of autumn leaves. The doctors had insisted on complete bed rest. In her mind, she was resting. She was also building her case. Her investigation began with the security breach at the hospital. Every medical center is required to keep a log of who views a patient's records and at what time. It was a fundamental part of HIPAA regulations. Citing the public leak of her information, Emma had her doctor request the access logs for her file. The report came back within 48 hours. On the day of the breach, a staff member named Brittany Hollister had accessed Emma's records. Brittany was a medical billing clerk, just 24 years old, and had been at the clinic for 3 years. Emma immediately ran a full background check. Brittany had a clean record. There was no history of selling private data. Nothing about her screamed criminal mastermind. However, she had recently deposited a large sum of money into her bank account. $40,000, all in cash. Someone had clearly paid her off. The only question was who? Emma began to trace the source of the money. It was not a simple task. Cash is used specifically because it is hard to track. But the person who paid her had slipped up. They had arranged the details over the phone. And phones always leave a trail. Using some of Maggie's contacts, Emma obtained a copy of Brittany's phone records. A single number appeared again and again in the days leading up to the data breach. It belonged to a disposable phone, the kind you can buy for cash at any corner store and then toss away. But that specific phone had been turned on for the first time in a particular store on a particular day. And that store, of course, had security cameras. Walter Briggs placed one call. 24 hours later, the security footage was in Emma's possession. The person on the video, purchasing that burner phone, was none other than Jessica Lane. Emma stared at the still image on her screen for a very long time. Jessica. It made perfect sense. Victoria would never get her own hands dirty. She would use someone she considered disposable, someone who was already tangled up in her schemes with Marcus. But Jessica had made a critical error. She let her face be seen on camera, and now Emma had all the power. The phone call was made at 11 o'clock that night. Jessica was in her chic Belltown apartment, the one Marcus was paying for. She was browsing through online job boards, trying to figure out her next move. It was obvious the Vance empire was crumbling, and she needed to find a lifeboat. Her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. "Hello? I know what you did," Emma said. Her voice was steady, cold, and radiated absolute control. A chill ran down Jessica's spine. "I have no idea what you are talking about. The hospital security video, the phone records, the money trail that leads right to you. Should I go on?" There was dead silence on the line. Jessica's mind raced, searching for an escape. She could deny everything. She could try to change the subject. She could just hang up and run. "This is how it is going to go," Emma stated plainly. "You are going to turn on Victoria. You will give me everything you have, every conversation, every instruction, every single piece of evidence you have about their fraudulent activities. And what if I say no? Then I go to the authorities first thing tomorrow morning and file federal charges: theft of medical records, conspiracy, wire fraud. You will get to spend the next 5 to 10 years of your life explaining to a cellmate how you ended up in federal prison." Jessica shut her eyes, her world collapsing. 5 to 10 years, a federal penitentiary. Her career would be over. Her entire life would be ruined. What is in it for me? You get to start over. I will not press charges. You leave Seattle for good, and we will never have to see or speak to each other again. There was a long, heavy silence. Jessica could hear the frantic pounding of her own heart. "Victoria records absolutely everything," Jessica finally admitted. Her voice was just a faint whisper. "She records her phone calls, her meetings. She keeps a file of dirt on everyone just in case she needs it as leverage. It is all kept in a safe in her office at home. I have the combination. How do you know it? She forced me to memorize it in case something ever happened to her and she needed me to get it. I need you to make copies of everything, the audio files, the documents, all of it. If she discovers that I betrayed her, she will ruin me. Then you should probably make certain she does not find out until you are long gone." Jessica took in a shaky breath, and then another. "I will send you everything. I will do it tonight. You made the right decision." Emma ended the call. She sat there in the quiet darkness for several minutes, placing a hand on her stomach, feeling the baby stir inside her. "We are almost there, sweetheart," she whispered into the silent room. "We are almost there." The files started coming in at 2 in the morning. Emma's hands trembled as she opened the secure, encrypted transfer. What she found inside were dozens of audio files, each one neatly labeled with dates and the names of the people involved. She clicked on the very first file. Victoria's voice, sharp and precise, filled the quiet room. "This scheme with the medical records has to move fast. We need to do it before her side of the story gets any more attention." Jessica's voice replied, "I know someone who works at her doctor's office. For $40,000, she will get us everything we need. Then do it, and make absolutely certain that nothing can be traced back to us. And what if the real documents do not contain what we are looking for?" There was a short pause. Then Victoria spoke again. "Then we will create what we are looking for. I have people who are experts at faking medical documents. By the time anyone can prove they are not real, the damage will already be done." Emma paused the recording. Her hands were shaking, not from anxiety, but from the feeling of victory. She clicked on a different file. This one was much older, from long before Emma had ever gotten married. "The patent issue is resolved," Victoria was saying to someone who might have been Howard, or maybe an attorney. "Every last piece of Hartwell's original documentation is gone. There is no proof left that could ever challenge our ownership." "What about his daughter?" "She is a nobody. Just some broke law student who has no connections and no idea what really happened. She will never pose a threat." A grim smile spread across Emma's face. Victoria could not have been more wrong. The final recording was the most explosive of all. It was Victoria talking to Arthur Higgins, discussing the details of the original theft. Howard insisted that the secret had to be kept. He knew that if the truth about the patents ever got out, everything they built would crumble. We had invested too much to allow a dead man's daughter to ruin it all. "What's the plan for Cole?" "He has been digging around for a while now. Richard Cole has no real proof. We are completely safe as long as the original paperwork remains hidden." "And what if those papers show up?" Victoria let out a cold, cynical laugh. "In that case, we will handle it the way we always have. We will eliminate anyone who stands in our way, no matter the cost." Emma had already secured every file. She made multiple copies and uploaded everything to a secure cloud server with several layers of backup. With the evidence safe, she called Richard. "I have it all," she told him. Victoria's voice on tape. She was confessing to the entire scheme with the medical records. She was admitting she stole the original patents. She was even discussing the cover-ups and the destruction of evidence. A long pause hung on the line. Finally, Richard's voice came through, thick with emotion. "Your father would be so proud of you. I am going to see this through to the end. This needs to be settled in court, in front of everyone. I want the entire world to know what she did." "When is the hearing?" Emma quickly did the math in her head. The patent hearing was set for 2 weeks away. By that time, she would be 8 months along in her pregnancy. She would be visibly large and constantly uncomfortable. It was the perfect scenario. "At the hearing," she declared, "I will be representing myself, and I am going to play those recordings for the whole room to hear. Can you truly handle that, from a physical standpoint?" Emma placed a hand on her stomach. The baby kicked back. A strong and definite movement. "I am a Hartwell," she stated firmly. "We always get back up." The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of non-stop work. Emma pulled 16-hour days, poring over evidence, crafting her arguments, and trying to predict every objection the Vance legal team might throw at her. Maggie provided support wherever she could, offering expert advice on courtroom tactics and legal precedents. Richard kept his distance, making resources available, but never stepping in. He knew this was Emma's battle to win. It was her time to shine. One evening, Daniel Cole showed up at her brownstone, completely unannounced. Emma had only met him once. A very brief encounter at Richard's estate. He was Richard's son, 35 years old. He had a quieter, more subdued handsomeness than Marcus. His eyes seemed to hold a mixture of sorrow and warmth. "My dad explained everything to me," Daniel said, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "He told me about your father, about the whole situation. What brings you here?" "I came because I needed to tell you how sorry I am for being unaware, for not being there to help you sooner." He took a breath. "And also because not a day has gone by since law school that I have not thought about you." Emma's memory sparked. They had gone out for a short time, many years before. It was before Marcus had come into her life with all his slick charm and empty promises. She had ended things with Daniel because he was moving to London while she was committed to staying in Seattle, and she knew long-distance relationships were doomed. Occasionally, she found herself wondering how things might have turned out if she had chosen differently. "You are here now," she said after a moment. "Is that going to be enough?" "It is a beginning." She did not ask him to come inside. The timing was not right for that. However, she did not shut the door on him either. She was starting to understand that some doors are better left open. 2 days before the hearing was scheduled, Victoria Vance vanished. Not in a literal sense. She remained in Seattle, inside her grand mansion, seemingly going about her usual business. But she had gone completely quiet. There were no public outings. She released no statements to the media. There were no calculated leaks or defensive moves. The silence was deeply unsettling. "She must be scheming," Emma said to Maggie, pacing back and forth in her living room. "Victoria is not the type to simply surrender. Perhaps she finally realizes she has lost. Victoria has never lost a battle in her entire life. She does not know the meaning of defeat." "So what do you believe her plan is?" Emma stopped pacing. She ran through everything she knew about Victoria Vance. She thought about the woman's absolute ruthlessness. She recalled her readiness to ruin anyone who got in her way. "She is going to target me during the hearing," Emma said with slow realization. "It will be something public, something theatrical, something designed to flip the story in her favor once more. You have the tapes. What could she possibly do to counter that?" Emma just shook her head. She had no idea, and that was what filled her with terror. The night before the hearing, sleep was an impossible luxury for Emma. She was lying in bed with her hand resting on her stomach, feeling the movements of her daughter. She was now 8 months pregnant. The end was so near. "Tomorrow, my sweet girl," Emma whispered softly. "Tomorrow, we finally get our justice." The baby gave a kick, then another, then 3 quick ones right after. A small smile touched Emma's lips in spite of her anxiety. "I know," she murmured. "I know. You are ready for this. And I am ready too." She shut her eyes and willed herself to get some rest. By this time tomorrow, her entire world would be different. The King County Courthouse was a formidable structure of concrete and glass, crafted to both intimidate and inspire awe. Emma got there at 8:30 in the morning. A full hour before the hearing was set to start. She had chosen a navy blue dress that both accommodated her 8-month pregnancy and projected an air of competence. It was professional without being distant. It showed determination without being hostile. She had meticulously planned every detail of her presentation, fully aware that a courtroom is as much about performance as it is about the law. The gallery was already buzzing with people when she walked in. There were reporters from every major news organization. Financial analysts were there, anxious to see the final verdict. Curious onlookers, who had been tracking the saga on social media, filled the remaining seats, and seated in the front row, their faces a mix of support and worry, were her allies: Richard Cole, Maggie Porter, Walter Briggs, and Daniel, who came without being asked and took a seat at the end of the row, close enough to offer aid, but distant enough to give her space. Marcus Vance was already present at the defendant's table, surrounded by his legal team. He looked like a wreck. His face was pale, and his eyes were sunken. The golden boy's shine had faded considerably over the past few weeks. Emma felt a brief, passing moment of what might have been pity, but she quickly pushed it away. He had made his own decisions. It was time for him to face the consequences. Victoria Vance was conspicuously not there. Emma settled herself at the plaintiff's table. By herself. There was no team of lawyers at her side. It was just Emma Hartwell, 8 months pregnant, representing herself against a massive corporate empire. The low chatter in the gallery grew louder. This was definitely not what anyone had anticipated. Judge Patricia Okonkwo made her entrance at exactly 9:30. She was 62 years old, with silver-streaked natural hair and a reputation for being fair, but having no patience for theatrics. She scanned the courtroom with the quiet confidence of a person who had seen it all. This hearing is regarding the case of Hartwell versus Vance Technologies, concerning disputes over patent ownership. Counsel, please state your names for the court record. Marcus's main attorney rose to his feet. David Morrison for the defendant, Your Honor. Along with my associates from Morrison and Foster. Emma stood up. Every single person in the room turned to look at her. Emma Hartwell, Your Honor, representing myself. The chatter in the courtroom swelled into a roar. Judge Okonkwo quelled the noise with a single sharp glance. Ms. Hartwell, are you aware that you are entitled to legal counsel? I am, Your Honor. I am also a licensed attorney. I have made the decision to manage this case on my own. Very well then. Let us begin. The morning was spent laying out the fundamental evidence. Emma submitted her father's original patent applications, which were dated 1991 and 1992. She detailed the chronology of his research, the groundbreaking technologies he had created, and the extensive paper trail that confirmed he was the true inventor of the core technology long before Vance Tech even came into existence. David Morrison tried his best to discredit her evidence. He questioned the validity of the documents. He made objections based on legal procedures. He attempted to portray Emma as nothing more than a resentful ex-wife bent on revenge. Emma calmly and systematically dismantled every one of his attacks. She quoted relevant case law. She brought up legal precedents. She exposed the flaws in his arguments with surgical accuracy. By the time they broke for lunch, the advantage had undeniably swung to her side. We will recess until 2 o'clock, Judge Okonkwo declared. Ms. Hartwell, I recommend you get some rest. You appear exhausted. Thank you, Your Honor. Emma collected her documents and started walking toward the gallery. Richard walked up to join her. You are doing an amazing job, he said in a low voice. This is not finished. Victoria still has not played her hand. It is possible she will not. Emma shook her head. Oh, she will. The only question is when. They located a vacant conference room where Emma could have a meal and get ready for the afternoon session. Daniel went to the courthouse cafe and brought back a sandwich for her. Maggie went over the strategy for the afternoon. At 1:45, the door swung open. Victoria Vance entered the room. As always, she looked flawless. She wore a cream-colored suit with perfect hair and diamond earrings that glittered in the light. Yet, there was an unfamiliar quality to her expression. It was something Emma had never witnessed on her face before. It was defeat. "May I have a word with you?" Victoria inquired. "In private?" Emma glanced at her friends. Richard's expression was unreadable, like stone. Daniel shifted his position slightly, subtly placing himself between Emma and Victoria. Maggie got to her feet, poised to step in if needed. "Anything you need to say to me can be said right here in front of them," Emma responded. Victoria paused for a moment before giving a slow, deliberate nod. "I am here to present an offer of settlement. You will receive full recognition of your father's patents. The company will transfer complete ownership to you, and you will receive $40 million in compensation for damages." The room fell completely silent. "In exchange for what?" Emma finally asked. "You must drop the criminal charges. The audio recordings you have will never be released to the public. My name will not be connected to a prison sentence." Emma carefully observed the woman who had made her life a living hell for the past 3 years. This was the woman who had tossed coins at her feet, the one who had dared to question the father of her unborn child, the same woman who tried to ruin her reputation with fake medical files. "No," Emma said firmly. Victoria's calm expression began to crumble. "I am giving you everything you wanted. The patents, the money, justice for your father. You are offering me silence," Emma countered. "You want me to simply let you walk away from everything you did. From all the lies, the fraud, the illegal attack on my private medical records." Emma rose to her feet, placing a protective hand on her pregnant belly. "You did everything in your power to destroy me, Victoria. You attempted to strip me of my reputation, my dignity, and the legitimacy of my own baby. And now you expect me to allow you to buy your freedom? I am trying to put an end to this, for the good of us both. No, you are only trying to save yourself." Emma walked until she stood just a few feet from Victoria. "This is what is going to happen. I will walk back into that courtroom. I'm going to play those recordings for everyone in the room to hear. And then, the judge is going to recommend you for criminal prosecution. You will destroy Marcus in the process. He had no idea about any of it." "I know that," Emma said. "And for that part, I am truly sorry. But he made a choice to believe his mother over his own wife. He decided to throw me out rather than ask hard questions about the family business. He made his own decisions." Victoria's mask of control finally shattered completely. Tears started to stream from her eyes. "Please," she whispered, "I am begging you." It was a strange feeling. Emma had played this scene in her mind 1,000 times. Victoria Vance, down on her knees, broken, utterly defeated, but it didn't bring the wave of satisfaction she had always imagined. "You should have considered this before you stole my father's life's work," Emma said in a quiet voice. "Before you ruined his reputation and let him die thinking he was a complete failure. Before you built your entire empire on his legacy for 40 years. She then turned to Richard. "It is time to go back to the courtroom." The afternoon session started at exactly 2 o'clock. Emma went back to her table. Victoria found a seat in the public gallery, her face once again a perfect mask of dignity. Whatever personal devastation she was experiencing, she refused to let the world see it. Judge Okonkwo called the court back to order. "Ms. Hartwell, you can now continue with your presentation." Emma stood up. "Your Honor, I would like to submit one final piece of evidence. I have audio recordings that were sourced from the defendant's own files, which document conversations about the patent theft and the cover-up that followed." David Morrison shot up from his seat. "Objection! We have no record of any of these alleged recordings. This is an improper introduction of evidence." The recordings were acquired through legal means, Emma replied calmly. They came from a witness who is ready to testify about their authenticity. The source was a former employee at Vance Technologies who had authorized access to these specific files. Judge Okonkwo thought for a moment. I will allow it, but it is subject to the testimony of authentication. You may play the recordings, Ms. Hartwell. Emma connected her laptop to the courtroom's sound system. Victoria's clear voice suddenly filled the entire room. The plan involving the medical records has to happen fast, before her story starts to get more attention. The gallery immediately erupted in noise. Journalists began writing as fast as they could. Camera phones began to appear, even though they were against the rules. Emma allowed the recording to continue. It captured Victoria talking about the $40,000 payment. It captured Victoria giving the authorization to create false medical documents. It captured Victoria's cold and calculated plan to destroy Emma's credibility. Next, she played the recording from long ago. It was Victoria discussing the original theft of the patent. She confirmed that Howard Vance had stolen the work of James Hartwell. She acknowledged the cover-up that had been maintained for 40 years. Howard always insisted we had to protect the secret. If anyone ever discovered where those patents actually came from, well, we are too far along to let a dead man's daughter ruin everything. Once the recordings were over, the courtroom was completely still. Marcus Vance sat with his head buried in his hands, his shoulders trembling. Emma couldn't tell if he was crying or just completely overwhelmed by the situation. Judge Okonkwo's voice broke the silence. Is there any objection to the authenticity of these recordings? David Morrison glanced at Victoria. Victoria remained silent. No, Your Honor, David Morrison said at last, his voice sounding defeated. Judge Okonkwo nodded her head slowly. Based on all the evidence that has been presented, I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff. The patents being disputed rightfully belong to the estate of James Hartwell, and therefore to his daughter, Emma Hartwell. The Vance Technologies' initial public offering is permanently halted until the transfer of all ownership is resolved. She then addressed Victoria directly. Mrs. Victoria Vance, the recordings we heard today point to multiple federal crimes, including fraud, conspiracy, and violations of medical privacy laws. I am therefore referring this matter to the United States Attorney's Office for a full investigation. Two federal marshals began walking toward Victoria. Mrs. Vance, you are required to surrender your passport at this time. You are forbidden from leaving the state of Washington. Victoria stood up. For a brief second, her eyes met Emma's from across the room. There was no sign of hatred in her expression. There was no defiance. There was only pure exhaustion. Then she turned to the marshals, presenting her wrists as if she were a queen on her way to the gallows. I understand, she said in a quiet voice. As the marshals guided Victoria away, she went past Emma's table. She stopped for just a second. You are more like your father than I ever knew, Victoria said softly. He never knew when to give up either. Emma did not say a word. She just watched as Victoria Vance, the very woman who had made her life a nightmare for 3 long years, was escorted out of the courtroom in custody. The hallway outside the courtroom was absolute chaos after the hearing ended. Journalists were yelling questions. The flashes from cameras were going off like fireworks. Security guards were struggling to keep any sense of order. Emma pushed her way through the mass of people, with Richard and Daniel on either side of her. She desperately needed fresh air. She needed space. She needed a moment to understand what had just taken place. Ms. Hartwell? Ms. Hartwell, how does it feel to have won? Are you going to pursue criminal charges against Marcus Vance too? What do you plan to do with the Vance Tech patents? Emma ignored them all. She just kept walking with her head down, making her way to the courthouse exit. But then a familiar voice cut through all the noise, a voice she recognized. Emma. Wait. She froze, and then she turned around. Marcus Vance was standing in the middle of the hallway, and he looked like a man who had aged 10 years in just one afternoon. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His eyes were red and swollen. His hands were trembling by his sides. The reporters grew quiet, sensing that something dramatic was about to happen. "I have to talk to you," Marcus said. "Please." Emma thought about saying no. She could just walk away. She could leave him there to face the cameras all by himself. But something she saw in his eyes made her stop. It was not a look of calculation. It was not manipulation. It was just genuine, shattering desperation. "5 minutes," she said. They managed to find an empty conference room. Emma's supporters waited just outside. Through the glass walls of the room, she could see Richard's tense posture and Daniel's watchful gaze. Marcus collapsed into a chair, all his previous confidence gone. "I did not know," he said, his voice starting to crack, "about the patents, about what happened to your father. I swear to God, Emma, I was not aware of any of it." Emma sat down across the table from him, her hands resting gently on her belly. "I believe you." A small spark of hope appeared in his eyes. "In that case, maybe we can figure something out. The company, or what is left of it, we could try to restructure. We could be partners. You would take the controlling share, and I could handle the operations. We could still." No, the hope in his eyes vanished. "Emma, please. I have lost everything. My bank accounts have been frozen. My mother is going to jail. Jessica is gone. I have absolutely nothing left." Emma reached inside her bag. She took out an envelope. She placed it on the table between them. "What is this?" he asked. $5,000 in cash and the keys to a 2014 Honda Civic. It is parked in the garage on level 2. Marcus just stared at the envelope. The realization slowly and painfully started to dawn on him. "You are making fun of me. I am giving you exactly what you deserve. It is what you gave to me when I was pregnant, alone, and completely terrified. You told me it was a generous offer back then. I am sure you will find it is just as generous now." Marcus's face twisted into an expression that was somewhere between rage and utter despair. "You can't do this to me. That baby is my child. I have rights. That baby is a Hartwell. She is going to carry my father's name. Your parental rights are going to be terminated unless you want to fight it out in court, where every single piece of evidence about your family's fraud will be made a part of the public record." She watched as Marcus's lawyer came in through the glass door, pulled his client to the side, and began whispering urgently to him. Marcus seemed to completely deflate. "You are going to raise my own child to hate me," he said in a low voice. "No." Emma stood up from her chair. "I am going to raise her to not think about you at all." She walked over to the door. "Say something." Marcus's voice cracked behind her. "Yell at me. Tell me that you hate me. Just do something." Emma paused with her hand on the doorknob. She did not say a word. Then she opened the door and walked out, leaving Marcus Vance all alone with the wreckage of his life. The walk to the courthouse exit felt completely unreal. Emma passed through the few remaining reporters without even looking at them. She went through the security checkpoint. She walked through the huge glass doors and finally stood on the courthouse steps. The Seattle sun had managed to break through the clouds. It was actual sunlight. She could feel it warm on her face. Richard came up to stand beside her. Daniel was on her other side. Maggie stood right behind her. "It is finally over," Richard said softly. Emma just shook her head. "It is not over. It is just different now. There is still the patent transfer that needs to be finalized. There are criminal proceedings to get through, and I have to figure out what to do with an entire company. But you won." She placed a hand on her belly. The baby moved, as if settling into a new spot. "We won, she corrected him. That night, Emma slept more deeply than she had in months. There were no dreams. There were no nightmares. There was just a deep, peaceful darkness. She awoke just after sunrise to a text message from Maggie. The news reports are incredibly positive. They are calling you the greatest comeback story of the decade. Also, Victoria was denied bail. She is going to remain in jail until the trial. Emma read the text message a second time. Then she put her phone down and walked over to the window. The city of Seattle spread out in front of her. She could see the Space Needle far in the distance. The waters of the Puget Sound glittered in the morning sun. This was the city that had seen her fall. And now, it would witness her rise. Her father had lived his life in this city. He had built his dreams in this city. He had died in this city. And now, his daughter was going to reclaim everything that had been stolen from him. "I did it, Dad," she whispered softly. "I finally did it." The following 6 weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings and strategic planning. The transfer of the patents was officially completed. All of James Hartwell's inventions were returned to his estate. Emma was now the sole proprietor of intellectual property valued in the billions. Vance Tech was forced to file for bankruptcy. The corporation that was built on a foundation of theft crumbled in on itself. Thousands of people lost their jobs. Emma immediately worked with Richard's financial team to create severance funds and offered job placement services. She had no intention of punishing innocent people for Victoria's crimes. Victoria Vance was formally charged with 17 federal crimes. These included fraud, conspiracy, violations of medical privacy laws, and destruction of evidence. Her trial was set for the next year. Every legal analyst agreed that a conviction was almost certain. Marcus Vance vanished. He was apparently somewhere in Ohio. He was working for an insurance company. Emma did not bother to look for him. She had meant every word she said. She was going to raise her daughter to never even think of him. No one knew where Jessica Lane had gone. She had run from Seattle the day after Emma stood up to her and had not been heard from since. There was a federal warrant out for her arrest, but she had disappeared into thin air. Emma turned her attention to what was important: her own health, her unborn child, her future. Then, on a peaceful Tuesday morning, in late August, 6 weeks after her victory in court, Emma Hartwell went into labor. The birth was not easy, but it was successful. It took 22 hours. At the last minute, a cesarean section was necessary. There were moments of fear and pain that Emma endured with the same fierce resolve she had shown through the entire crisis. And then, at long last, she heard a cry. The nurse gently placed a tiny, wailing baby into Emma's arms. "Congratulations, Ms. Hartwell. You have a beautiful, healthy baby girl." Emma gazed down at her daughter. She had dark hair, tiny, clenched fists. Her eyes were squeezed shut against the bright glare of the room. "Hi, my sweet girl," Emma whispered, tears of joy running down her face. "Hi there, I am your mommy." The door to the room opened. Maggie came in first, and Richard was right behind her. Daniel lingered by the door, unsure if he should be there. "She is absolutely gorgeous," Maggie said, her own eyes filling with tears. "Just so beautiful." Richard stepped a little closer, looking at the infant's tiny face. "What did you name her?" Emma had been thinking about a name for months. She had gone through dozens of choices, but when it came down to it, there was only one right answer. "Grace," she announced. "Her name is Grace Catherine Hartwell." Catherine was the name of her own mother, the mother who had passed away before Emma was old enough to have any memories of her, the woman whose death had started so many awful events. Grace was for her future, Catherine was for her past. Richard wiped at his eyes. "James would be so proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. So very proud. Emma then looked toward Daniel, who was still standing hesitantly in the doorway. "You can come inside," she told him. He walked in slowly, staring at the baby with a look of pure amazement. "I am so sorry I was not here for you," he said. "I was in London for 5 years. I should have been here. You are here now. Is that good enough?" Emma looked down at her daughter, at this new little person who was a symbol of everything she had fought so hard for, her past and her future, her loss and her hope. "It is a start," she replied. 1 year later. Emma was standing in the lobby of Hartwell Technologies, watching her employees as they poured through the main doors to start another workday. The building had once been the headquarters for Vance Tech. Now it had a different name on the front. A much better name. Grace was nestled in a carrier on Emma's chest, happily cooing at the world around her. The change over the past 12 months had been nothing short of incredible. Emma had completely rebuilt her father's company from scratch, using his patents to create brand new innovations. She had hired amazing people, including many who used to work at Vance Tech, and had lost their jobs for no reason of their own. The company was more than just successful. Of course, the bottom line was strong, but the real success was something you could feel. It was a shared sense of purpose, a mission that made people talk about their work with genuine pride. Ms. Hartwell, her assistant, a sharp young woman named Sarah, approached holding a tablet. "The quarterly reports are done, and there is someone here to see you." Emma frowned, confused. She did not have any meetings scheduled this early in the morning. "Who is it?" Sarah paused for a moment. "He says his name is Marcus Vance." Emma felt her heart skip a beat, then steady itself into a firm, deliberate rhythm. "Send him up, to my office." She took the elevator to the top floor, her baby, Grace, sleeping soundly in the carrier, strapped to her chest. The gentle movement had lulled her to sleep, and her tiny fist was curled up against Emma's collarbone. Marcus was waiting in the reception area. He looked much older, worn out. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by clothes that looked like they came from a department store. His hair was longer, with noticeable streaks of gray at his temples. He held himself like a man who had been taught some hard lessons about humility. "Emma." His voice sounded hesitant. "Thank you for seeing me." "My office, she said, leading him inside and closing the door. In her baby carrier, Grace stirred but stayed asleep. Marcus glanced around the room, taking in the modern furniture and the windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. His eyes settled on the photos on her desk. One was of Emma's father, looking young and smiling. The other showed Emma and Grace, taken the day they left the hospital. He lingered on that second picture. "She looks just like you," he said quietly. "She looks like my father," Emma corrected. A heavy silence hung between them. "Why are you here, Marcus?" He sank into a chair, not waiting for an invitation. Emma didn't protest. "I got a job," he told her. "Selling insurance in Ohio. I make $42,000 a year. My apartment is 800 square feet. A faint, bitter smile appeared on his face. "My Honda Civic finally died last month. I had to start taking the bus. Is this story supposed to make me feel sorry for you?" No, I am not looking for your sympathy." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I am here because I needed to see her, just once. I know I signed away my rights. I know I have no claim to her, but she is still my blood. She is still my daughter. I just wanted to make sure she was okay." Emma studied him. This was the man she had married, the man who had completely broken her, the man who was now clearly broken himself. She thought about hatred and about getting revenge. She remembered wanting the satisfaction of watching him suffer the same way he had made her suffer. Then she realized, with a sense of genuine surprise, that she no longer felt any of those things. She felt absolutely nothing at all. She is healthy, Emma said. She is happy, and she is loved. Tears began to fill Marcus's eyes. That is all I needed to hear. He stood up and walked to the door, then stopped with his hand on the handle. I am sorry, he said, without looking back at her, for everything. I know it does not matter. I know it does not change a thing, but I needed to say it. Emma watched his back, the way his shoulders slumped with the weight of all his regrets. Marcus? He turned around. Do not come back. He nodded slowly, a look of grim acceptance on his face. Goodbye, Emma. Goodbye. He left, and the door clicked shut behind him. In her carrier, Grace began to stir, opening her eyes. They were green, Emma's eyes, James Hartwell's eyes. That was nobody, sweetheart, Emma whispered. Just a nobody from the past. That evening, Emma sat in her home office while Grace played on a rug on the floor nearby. The room was comfortable, but not flashy. It had warm lighting, and family photos hung on the walls. She sat at the desk that had belonged to her father, which she had taken out of storage and had lovingly restored. Daniel walked in holding 2 cups of tea. He had been coming around more often lately. He was not pushy or demanding. He was simply present. The Zurich deal is closed, he said, handing her a cup. You are now the official owner of the largest portfolio of tech patents on the West Coast. Emma smiled. My father would have laughed at that. He just wanted to build things. He never cared about owning any of them. But you care, Daniel said. I care about protecting what was his, and what is now hers. She looked over at Grace. She will never have to fight for what belongs to her. I made sure of that. Daniel sat down beside her, and their shoulders touched. And what about you? What do you want? Emma thought about the question. She reflected on the past 2 years. The divorce, the discovery, the long, hard battle, the final victory. Peace, she said at last. I think I finally have it. Grace crawled over to her and pulled herself up, using Emma's leg. Mama, she said, her voice clear. It was her first word, which she had learned just last week. Emma lifted her daughter into her arms, holding her tight and inhaling the sweet, clean scent of her hair. You know, my love, your grandfather had a saying. He believed silence was a sign of strength, not weakness. It meant you were being patient, waiting for the right moment when you held all the winning cards. Her gaze drifted to the Seattle skyline outside the window. This was the city of her father's dreams, the place where she had hit rock bottom, and the very same place she had clawed her way back up. And when that moment comes, you do not have to utter a single word. 3 years passed. Emma was standing by the window in her high-rise office, watching the sunset bleed gold and pink across the city. In the background, she could hear the gentle hum of her company still hard at work. Her team was building, creating, and carrying on the legacy her father had begun. Grace was now but 3 years old, a bright, inquisitive, and wonderfully stubborn child who was the spitting image of her mother and grandfather. She was at home with her nanny, likely resisting bedtime with all her might, trying to negotiate for just one more story in her tiny, serious voice. A soft knock came at her door. Come in. Daniel walked in, a hint of nervousness on his face. They had officially been a couple for 2 years, their relationship a slow, careful bloom. Both of them understood from past heartbreaks that trust was something you had to build, not just expect. He told her the quarterly reports were in. We have set new profit records. Again. That is great news. And the foundation started by your father's old colleagues just gave out its 100th scholarship in his name. A genuine smile spread across Emma's face. James Hartwell never cared for fame or money. His real passion was helping others, That scholarship fund was as much a part of his legacy as his brilliant patents. Daniel took a small step closer and said, "There is something else, too." He slipped his hand into his pocket, and Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. "Daniel, I have been carrying this with me for the last 3 months," he confessed, revealing a small box covered in velvet. "I was trying to find the perfect time, the perfect words to say, but then it hit me. There is no such thing as a perfect moment. There is only this one, right now." He opened the box to reveal a ring inside. It was not flashy or designed to impress anyone. It was just beautiful, elegant, perfect. "Emma Hartwell," Daniel began, his voice surprisingly firm, even though his hands were shaking slightly. "You are the most powerful, brilliant, and headstrong woman I have ever had the privilege to know. You went to war for your family, you went to war for your daughter, and you went to war for yourself. And you won against all of it, against everyone." He paused, taking in a steadying breath. "I am not trying to compete with your past. All I want is to be there with you, right by your side, for everything that comes next. Will you marry me?" Emma's eyes moved from the ring to Daniel's hopeful face, then to the city lights twinkling in the evening twilight. Her mind flashed to Marcus, to the terrible mistake of marrying a man who only saw her as a minor character in the movie of his life. Daniel was nothing like him. Daniel saw her as the main character, the hero of her own epic. He was not trying to steal her spotlight. He wanted to stand beside her and share in its warmth. "Yes," she whispered. The word was quiet, but it was solid, confident, and real. "Yes?" he asked, needing to hear it again. "Yes." With a look of pure relief, Daniel slid the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. He leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that was gentle and full of reverence. It was a promise. "I love you," he murmured against her lip. "I love you too." For a long moment, they just stood there, holding each other as the last rays of the sunset poured through the glass. Then, a buzz from Emma's phone broke the spell. She glanced at the screen and let out a laugh. "Grace is putting up a fight about going to sleep. She claims she has to tell me something very important about dinosaurs." A wide smile grew on Daniel's face. "That sounds about right. Let us go home." Home. That single word had held so many different meanings for Emma throughout her life. It had been the tiny, cramped apartment of her youth. It had been the cold, empty mansion she shared with her ex-husband. It had been the brownstone where she pieced her life back together. But now, home felt much simpler. It was a cozy house in a peaceful neighborhood. It was a daughter who could talk for hours about dinosaurs. It was a man who loved her with no strings attached. "Yeah," Emma said, reaching for Daniel's hand. "Let us go home." A month went by, and then a letter arrived for Emma. The return address was a federal prison. It was from Victoria Vance, who was in the middle of an 8-year sentence. Emma's first impulse was to toss it in the trash without a second thought, but an unexpected feeling stopped her. It was a need for some kind of final closure she had not realized was still lingering. She tore open the envelope. "Emma, I am writing this letter with the full understanding that you may never lay eyes on it. You might just throw it away, and I would not blame you if you did, but I feel compelled to say these things, even if I am only saying them to an empty room. I am not looking for your forgiveness. I know I have not earned it. There is no apology big enough to cover the harm I caused your father, you and your little girl. I just want you to understand one thing. This is not an excuse. It is simply the truth. I was only 22 years old when I married Howard. I was young, naive, and I thought I was in love. By the time I found out what he did to James Hartwell, I was already pregnant with Marcus. I felt trapped, complicit in his crime, and utterly terrified. For 40 years, I guarded that secret because I saw no other way out. I became the monster my survival required. And by doing that, I lost any hope of becoming the woman I could have been. I sometimes see you on the news. I see your company, your daughter, your life. From the ruin we created, you have built something truly beautiful. Your father would be so proud. I never met the man, but I was a witness to Howard's intense fear of him. James Hartwell must have been an extraordinary person to inspire that kind of fear in a man like my husband. You are his daughter. That is the most valuable thing he left you. It is not the patents or the money. It is the courage to stand up for what is right, no matter the personal cost. I am going to die in this prison. The doctors have told me my heart is giving out. A fitting end, I suppose, but I needed you to know this before I go. You won. You won completely and absolutely, and you deserved every bit of it. Victoria. Emma read the letter a second time. She folded it neatly and tucked it away in a drawer. She did not feel a sense of victory or satisfaction. She did not feel any of the emotions she thought she would if Victoria ever admitted her loss. All she felt was a deep sense of weariness and a readiness to finally move forward. They were married in September on a flawless autumn day. The ceremony was small and intimate, with only the people who truly mattered present. Richard Cole, who had become a father figure to Emma, was there. Maggie Porter, the friend who helped her rediscover her strength, was there, along with a few other close friends and family. Grace served as the flower girl, a role she took on with the intense focus of a brain surgeon as she scattered flower petals down the aisle. Emma walked down the aisle by herself. There was no one to give her away because she was not an object to be handed over. She was simply Emma, walking toward the rest of her life. Her eyes were clear, and her heart was full. Daniel was waiting for her at the altar, and the way he looked at her made her feel like she was the most incredible sight in the world. The ceremony itself was short, traditional, and absolutely perfect. I do, Emma said, when it was her turn. I do, Daniel repeated. And just like that, they were husband and wife. During the reception, Richard gently pulled Emma aside. Your father would have absolutely loved this, he said, his eyes glistening with tears he was trying to hold back. I know. I made a promise to him that I would look after you. I like to think he would agree that I finally kept that promise. Emma gave him a tight hug. This was the man who had been weighed down by guilt for 30 years, the man who had helped her get justice, and the man who never asked for a single thing in return. Thank you, she whispered into his shoulder, for everything. You should thank your father. I was only doing what he asked of me. Later that evening, as the celebration was coming to an end, Emma found herself standing alone on the terrace, gazing up at the stars. Inside, Grace was sound asleep on Daniel's shoulder. The last of the guests were making their way out. The night air was cool and crisp. Emma let her mind drift back over her life's journey. She thought of the little girl who lost her dad when she was just 10. She thought of the woman who lost her sense of self in a toxic marriage. She thought of the mother who fought her way back from having nothing. She thought about silence, about how she had turned it into a weapon, letting it do the talking when words were pointless. And she remembered her father's letter, the one Richard had given her on that very first day. The world might have its own ideas about failure and success, but you need to know that your father was a genius, and his dream was stolen. You are not the child of a failed visionary. You are the heir to a kingdom. Go and claim what is rightfully yours. And she had done it. She had taken back everything that belonged to her. It was more than just the patents and the money. It was her name, her dignity, and her future. It was a future where her own daughter would never have to feel small or powerless. It was a future built upon the wreckage of the past, now reformed into something strong and new. Daniel came up beside her, with Grace still sleeping peacefully on his chest. "Are you ready to go?" he asked in a soft voice. Emma looked at her husband, then at her daughter, and then at the life they had built. "Yeah," she said with a smile. "I am ready." The three of them walked out into the night together, leaving the lights of the party behind them. They were leaving the past behind, too. They were walking toward whatever came next. And for the first time, in a very long time, Emma Hartwell was not afraid. An epilogue, 10 years later. Grace Hartwell, now 13 years old, was standing inside her grandfather's old workshop. Emma had kept the space perfectly preserved, exactly as James Hartwell had left it. His tools were still on the walls, his notebooks were stacked on the benches, his dreams were still visible on every single surface. Emma had decided to show it to her daughter on her 13th birthday as a sort of rite of passage, a way to connect her to her roots. Grace gently ran her fingers along an old circuit board, being careful not to move anything. "He made all of this?" she asked in awe. "He did," Emma confirmed. "He did it long before anyone else even imagined it was possible. He could see the future, and then someone took it away from him, yes. But you got it back?" Emma smiled. "Yes, I did." Grace stood in silence for a moment, letting it all sink in. She had her grandfather's thoughtful eyes, her mother's unwavering resolve, and a brilliant mind of her own that sometimes amazed Emma with its sharpness. "Will you teach me?" Grace finally asked. "Will you teach me how to build things, the way he did?" Emma felt a familiar sting of tears in her eyes. It was the circle, completing itself. The legacy was being passed on. "Yes, sweetheart, I will teach you everything I know." Grace carefully picked up one of her grandfather's old notebooks, holding it with the reverence it deserved. "Mom," she said. "Yes, thank you, for fighting for him, for fighting for us." Emma wrapped her arms around her daughter, pulling her into a tight embrace. "That is what Hartwells do," she said softly. "We always get back up." Through the workshop window, the lights of Seattle twinkled in the night. It was the same city where James Hartwell had chased his dreams, where Emma had fallen and then soared, and where Grace would now build her own future. 3 generations, one powerful legacy. It was a story of silence and strength, handed down from one to the next, becoming more powerful with every telling. Remember this: your silence is not surrender, it is strategy. The people who underestimate you today will be the same people watching you rise tomorrow. The Hartwells always get back up, and so will you. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment telling me your favorite moment. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. And if you have not subscribed yet, join our family so we can bring you more stories that inspire, heal, and empower. Thank you for staying until the end. You are exactly the kind of person this story was made for. This content was carefully researched, crafted, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful lessons and lasting value to our audience.